Stretching across the Detroit River, the Gordie Howe International Bridge was designed as a new artery for North American trade. It connects Detroit, Michigan to Windsor, Ontario, two manufacturing powerhouses at the heart of the region's economy.
Historically, Windsor has been the auto hub for Canada, just like Detroit had been in the United States.
But as the bridge nears opening, the landscape it was built for is starting to fray. Canada is building the Gordie Howe in part to take pressure off the aging Ambassador Bridge nearby, while strengthening vital supply chains with its top trading partner, the United States.
I don't think they expected Donald Trump to come along and threaten that.
Here's why Canada invested over $4 billion into the Gordie Howe Bridge and what Trump's tariffs mean for its future. This stretch of the Detroit River is one of the busiest international crossings in North America. It's a crucial connection between Canada and the U.S., which traded over $760 billion in goods in 2024. Historically, around a quarter of that trade has moved via this artery, the privately owned Ambassador Bridge.
That bridge itself is one of the busiest bridges between the two countries that connects these two major industrial centers.
The nearly century-old Ambassador Bridge has had its problems. Chief among them, its private ownership, which limits the control Canada and the U.S. have over it. Yet, it remains the primary crossing for trade in the region.
Being so dependent on the Ambassador Bridge has left Canada in the past vulnerable. A few years ago, there were some protests in Canada, and they blockaded the Ambassador Bridge. Within about a week, there was a threat of auto plant shutdowns in the U.S. because of this blockade.
Enter the Gordie Howe, named after the Canadian hockey legend who played for the Detroit Red Wings. The bridge, with 6 lanes of traffic, will connect Detroit and Windsor by linking I-75 in Michigan to Highway 401 in Ontario, creating a seamless route.
What it really does is connect the highway system between Canada and the U.S., going all the way from Montreal to Florida.
A 2021 study estimated that the bridge would cut 20 minutes off crossing time, saving truckers over $1.5 billion over 30 years. And in 2012, Canada agreed to front the entire cost of construction, including the U.S. Customs Plaza, recouping the cost through future toll revenue.
Canada's footing the bill for the entire construction cost, mostly because they're more desperate to create this corridor than the U.S. was. There had been a slow bleed of automotive industry south, and Canada was hoping that by strengthening the ties between the two cities and the two industrial heartlands, that they would be able to sort of stave off some of that constant erosion.
Once completed, the Gordie Howe Bridge is expected to increase capacity for commercial vehicles and speed up customs processing, benefiting both commuters and the surrounding industries, specifically the automotive industry. Last year, Canada exported over $27 billion in cars to the United States and about $19 billion in car parts. But the supply chain for those cars integrates the industry across multiple countries.
Canada, the U.S., and Mexico have realized that it's more efficient for certain regions to specialize in certain parts. You can have an auto part go over both borders 6 or 7 times before it ends up in a car assembly in Michigan.
This Stellantis plant in Windsor, for example, builds cars that then get exported to the U.S., but it relies on Detroit-based suppliers for parts. And in Michigan, major plants for Ford and GM have imported Canadian parts for their vehicles, while car plants in Ontario have used American parts in their assembly. What's more, the industry relies on a just-in-time delivery model, where parts arrive exactly when needed to minimize inventory held on site, cut storage costs, and keep operations lean.
The way that they've built out these extremely efficient supply chains is to have the exact number of transmission parts that they need exactly when they need it.
The Gordie Howe was meant to support those tight timelines with more efficient delivery, but
now again, with Trump's tariffs and his explicit desire to move car factories and auto parts manufacturers out of Canada and Mexico, it seems like the Gordie Howe Bridge won't be able to solve that problem.
We'll be announcing the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for a number of reasons.
This year, the U.S. announced a series of 25% tariffs, first on Canadian goods, then on car imports, and finally on auto parts. In response, Canada hit back with its own 25% tariffs on certain U.S.-made vehicles.
So every time now that a company will ship a part across the border, they're going to have to pay a 25% tariff. Car makers have warned that Trump's tariffs are going to lead to shutdowns in the auto industry, and we've already very early on seen indication that, in fact, that is happening.
Earlier this month, Stellantis announced temporary production pauses at 2 plants due to the new U.S. tariffs, including its Windsor assembly plant.
All of that inevitably is going to impact traffic.
and decreased traffic means decreased revenue. In early planning stages, a 2010 report projected the bridge would generate $70.4 million in toll revenue in its first year, which was expected to be 2016 at the time.
Now that tariff war is happening and trade ties are loosening, it's unclear how much of that will actually become real.
The Gordie Howe Bridge is slated to open in fall 2025, with the Canadian government spending $6.4 billion Canadian dollars on the project, the equivalent of $4.6 billion US dollars, and some $500 million more than its original projected cost.
We don't really know how much trade between the two countries will be impacted, whether the tariffs last. If there is less traffic that goes across the Gordie Howe Bridge, it's almost inevitable that it's going to take a lot longer to pay back the $6 billion that Canada has taken on to build a bridge. You could end up in a scenario where Canada has footed the bill for a major bridge that ends up being a bit of a white elephant.
The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority declined to comment, but as tensions mount between the U.S. and Canada over tariffs, some experts warn the bridge may not deliver on its original promise, at least not as quickly as once hoped.
This is an extremely fraught moment in time in Canada-U.S. relations. Gordie Howe Bridge was meant to be, in some ways, a celebration of the close ties between the countries. Those ties are frayed. The Gordie Howe Bridge threatens now to become a symbol of an era that once was and may never be again.